Good evening, everyone. We are related to have Mr. Kaushik Pathak sir as the guest speaker for the day. I present a heart welcoming to you, sir. Moreover, we have received 100 plus responses for this webinar. But yeah, people will be joining soon in 5 to 10 minutes. I hope that we'll be reaching the today's limit of 100. And we have received a lot of more questions for the speaker related to strategy and all. And yeah, so I assure that sir will be taking each and every question at the end, and mostly I think so no doubts will be left for the audience, because the speaker is so great, he will be covering everything in his session. So I like to hand over to Anushka and Gorika, the moderators for the day, for taking the session forward, and they will be introducing our esteemed speaker, Mr. Kaushik Pathak sir. Thank you.
If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. With this encouraging thought, I, Anushka,
and I, Gorika, wish you a very good evening and welcome our esteemed guest, Mr. Kaushik Pathak, department heads, and all the attendees.
So today, the Commerce Society of Ramjas College is here to present an insightful webinar on the topic, a brief overview of corporate strategy, which will be taken forward by Mr. Kaushik Pathak sir. The list of achievements of our esteemed guest is really long. He has more than 10 years of experience.
Mr. Pathak is currently working as an assistant director at EY, helping clients with their organic and inorganic growth strategy. He has also worked as an associate director at PwC India and corporate planning lead at Infosys Limited. He holds a Prince 2 Practitioner certification from Excelos Global Practice.
Mr. Pathak is member of the Interaction Design Foundation and has pursued his PGDM in marketing. He has been the winner of the Best Summer Project Contest for strategic marketing projects at Pidilite and has also completed several key projects for Fortune 500 companies.
So without any further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Kaushik Pathak sir to take over and enlighten us.
Thank you so much for those glowing words. I mean, I'm completely, taken aback by so many kind words being spoken by everyone. But thank you so much for that warm welcome. And without wasting much time, I will start talking about what I'm here for today. So to lay the expectation of this particular, for the next 1 hour, what we shall be doing is very simple. What I intend to do is give a very high level flavor of what corporate strategy is at this point in time, and what are some of the avenues that are available for one to really look at building a career within corporate strategy. So the expectations that one would have from this session would be to have a higher level understanding of what corporate strategy is all about, and how one would go ahead and build their career in it. This session would not cover elements like picking strategic frameworks, or looking at building business models, or looking at overall addressing a particular strategy engagement, the methodology, how to go ahead and solve it. We can do that at some later sessions if needed and if people are interested, but that's the context that I want to set for this particular session. So moving ahead, I of course had put in a slide which would be talking about what I've done in the past, but Gorika and Anushka have done a wonderful job talking about it. Very briefly, all I'll say is that in my past 15 years of work experience, strategy has, for me, the way how I have seen it, evolved with every organization change, role change that I've seen. It has been different in different organizations, and the way how it is addressed and the way how it is built it depends on the kind of organization setup that that one is in. So, at a very high level, we are all aware of what strategy is, but the biggest conundrum of it is that even today, when somebody asks me what is strategy, I keep scratching my head and thinking about what would be a good answer for that. Strategy, in my opinion, is basically a plan that is designed to achieve a pre set goal. It is nothing but a set of, it should be as clear as a set of simple directions to achieve the goal that the organization has set out for. A high level goal for an organization could be as simple as, I want to grow my revenues over the next 5 years. Now, that is a very high level statement. Breaking that down requires a lot of understanding, a lot of data, a lot of analysis, which is then distilled into very clear, very precise, very focused set of plans and actions that will lead you to reach that particular goal. So what happens in an organization is a high level goal, like I want revenue to grow over the next 5 years, is translated into something that is very specific. Like, I would want our organization's revenues to grow by 25% over the next 5 years. Now, for a goal like that to happen, there will be a lot of data that will need to be collected, will need to be consumed, will need to be researched and thought about before you create concrete plans on how do you go about and achieve that very ambitious goal that the stakeholders have set for that particular organization. Data points such as looking at what the market is all about. So if the company is in a expanding market, an example is, if the company is an SUV manufacturer in India, it is a market which is expanding very rapidly. You would find a lot of growth potential within that, a lot of organic growth potential as well, that would take you to your goal. However, if you're in a shrinking industry, if you're looking at, say, something like an airline industry that has been hit pretty hard by COVID, and you set yourself a very ambitious target of growing by 25% over the next 5 years, that would be a highly unlikely scenario to achieve, given that there would be a lot of uncertainties, and to achieve those sort of growth numbers may not be possible at that point. So it is the market which will determine what sort of goals are actually achievable. But many a times that data needs to be researched, needs to be found, needs to be analyzed, sampled, and then given in a very compelling format. Giving a high level answer like, the SUV market is growing fast in India is not enough for any organization. You need to be extremely specific about those data points that you will gather and then give to the stakeholders to go ahead and project the growth in the appropriate manner. So the data which is gathered would include things like, how many car purchasers are there in the market, how many people are aspiring to buy a car, how many people can afford buying a car. Within that, how many of them can afford buying an SUV or would want to purchase something like that. Overall, you will be looking at other data points like government regulations, wherein you have got certain regulations that are being updated quite frequently in the automobile market. And you will be taking all of those data points and then analyzing them to really try and find out what is it that that really makes the difference end of the day. So, for example, you will be having a lot of data about luxury cars or about entry-level cars, which would not be needed. So you would be weeding out all of that and then looking in a very focused manner at the data that is relevant to you and start analyzing the trends. You would then start looking at whether this particular thing is growing, and if it's growing, why is it growing? The number of buyers. The growth in the SUV market, for example, in today could be attributed to a couple of reasons. One, pent-up demand. People have not bought vehicles over the past year and a half owing to the pandemic, And now that the consumer confidence is growing, you're seeing a lot of demand that is being generated in the market, and hence that is leading to growth. This could be a temporary phenomenon. So you need to analyze those sort of things and find out whether it's a temporary phenomenon or whether it's a long-term trend that you're observing in the market. Once you have those sort of analysis in place, you will be coming across and bringing them in actionable insight format. For example, an actionable insight would be that of the aspiring car buyers, 28% of all the car purchasers would seriously consider buying an SUV over the next 4 quarters. And these buyers would generally tend to be people in the age group of 25 to 40 with a family, with a young family, and would look at these 2 or 3 specific items in terms of their requirements. Now that an insight of that sort has been drawn out through the data and analysis, you will then start planning on how do you achieve that. You would look at internally whether you have the capacity or the product in your portfolio that would meet that need. If you are a Maruti, for example, Maruti Suzuki, you don't have a good SUV in your portfolio at this point in time. So for you, if you wanted to go ahead and look at 25% growth in the SUV market, what is it that you would need to do? You would look at multiple options. You would look at growing organically, which would mean that you would look at building a new model ground up within the company, and then launch it and then take it to the market. But there are pitfalls with that. It takes time to develop a vehicle, time to get those regulations in place, time to get all the permits, etc. done. And then after that, you have to convince the consumers that you are actually a good SUV manufacturer. Or else you could do something like what the Tata Group did. You would go ahead and purchase a company like Jaguar Land Rover and bring in the necessary technology and expertise to really ramp up your skills quickly and have something ready to take to market within a quicker time frame, and have the consumer confidence at the same time. You would go ahead and create very concrete plans, which would then be articulated in a manner that can be followed by everyone in the organization in a coordinated fashion to reach and achieve your ultimate goal. So now that we know what strategy is, I'm sure a lot of you know about this already, but the question then comes, where did strategy really come into picture? I mean, how did it really arise? So the answer to that is this.
From Army.
So strategy actually arose from war. So in the past, wars were the only thing that rulers were truly, occupied with, apart from tax collection from their subjects. Building public infrastructure, etc., were of course done, but those were done by the later, as civilizations continued growing. Those are things that came on at a later point in time. But war is something that is inherent to human nature. Pardon me if you don't agree with it, but that's the one thing that we've been really good at from the start of mankind. So war is where strategy actually came into picture. You had generals at the battlefield who would go ahead and battles in the start were just straightforward. You would take a stick and stone and throw at each other. And, it would be bloody, it would be long. The victories would be pyrrhic, which means that, there would be no clear winners or losers, and both the sides would land up losing. Slowly but surely, some of the smarter people then started thinking there's a better way to do this. And therein was where, the plans started being built, and then those plans evolved into strategy. So generals started looking at how do you really beat the enemy in a comprehensive manner while suffering the minimum losses ourselves, taking the minimum amount of time. So those were actually the beginning, the origins of strategy as we know it. And that's where we saw the genesis of it. So now that we know what strategy is, one word that we always keep hearing along with strategy is tactics. We hear about tactical plans, tactical actions that have been done. So what's the difference between the two? So strategy is something that is long term. It's something which has a long term goal in mind. It is very all encompassing of sorts, and is something that is at very high level. Execution for strategy involves multiple people, multiple work streams, multiple programs and things that are happening around, and it takes time for those actions to show its outcomes. So strategy is something that is extremely high level and looks at more long term and bigger goals. Tactics, however, are very clear. You have one small single objective. You will plan to achieve that particular objective, and you will have that outcome of your particular objective immediately after you've executed the plan. So that is something that we should keep in mind. Now that we know a little bit about strategy, where is it that we see strategy today? Where is it that we hear this word across the world? So basically, strategy is a part of every organization which has to achieve, and it may have different names in departments or the organizations that are having these sort of functions. It can be called a planning department, it can be called corporate strategy, it can be called business strategy, it can be just called as overall strategic initiatives department as well. But the three broad kind of organizations that we associate strategy teams with today are government organizations, corporations, and consulting firms. So within government organizations, and I'll take an example of India itself. So we have a body called the Niti Aayog, for example, that's present today. The Niti Aayog's role broadly is to provide inputs and plan for, instead of the 5-year commissions which were there, they are the ones who are responsible today for looking at what some of those 5-year objectives should be, what are some of the long-term goals that the government should have, and then accordingly the government departments, the different ministries, they go ahead and of course it's a two-way path. The ministries of course will give input to the Niti Aayog and vice versa, but once that plan or objective has been decided, the ministries then go ahead and execute the same. Governments, the kind of goals and the strategies that the government has are very long term in nature. A very simple strategy, just give me a moment, a very simple goal or objective of the government, for example, was the eradication of polio. That was a very simple objective that the government of India had. To meet that particular objective of eradicating polio, the government had to come up with a plan and with a strategy. It knew that you cannot.
Hi everyone. So am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Now loud and clear.
Yes, sir.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. So at a high level, I was just saying that the government's goals are very long drawn. They have a very clear objective, but those goals take years and years to achieve. These are very long-term plans, very long-term strategies that are built. You have multiple stakeholders. Something like a pulse polio campaign required coordination across multiple levels of different departments, and the execution scale was enormous. So for something like that, a planning team or a strategy team could take several months and even years to come up with a comprehensive, complete plan and then roll it out in a correct manner. The challenge that the government faces is whenever a program is not implemented properly, it can lead to a severe backlash, and that could set their goal back by years and decades at times. So in the planning departments of governments, they need to be very clear that we have to deal with multiple levels of uh, complexities. We have multiple layers of people to deal with. There will be a lot of pushback and a lot of opposition to the plans that one may have, and you have to win those people over and bring them on board, and you need to ensure that your execution is flawless. So something like this is handled by teams like the Niti Aayog, which is spending their days and nights just trying to ensure that something as simple as polio can get eradicated without facing too many roadblocks. Moving to the next category, we have large corporations or small corporations, corporations of every type. These are your typical companies that are there around. Companies generally tend to have a set of stakeholders which involve your owners, could be shareholders or could be private owners. Then there are, of course, the employees who are a part of the organization, and then you have consumers and customers of the particular organization who are another set of stakeholders, and you have the general society and government also as a stakeholder into all of their operations. So these stakeholders, they typically tend to influence the goals that the corporations have. The biggest stakeholders generally tend to be the owners or the shareholders, who will land up setting ambitious targets to the organization. So something like a shareholder body can decide that we would like to see the value of our shares grow by X% over a period of years, or we would like to see X% of dividend being paid out over a period of years. So those could be some of the very simple goals that would be set across by these stakeholders to the corporations. And these goals will be taken up by the board of directors in the organization, discussed, debated, and then agreed upon. And then a long-term plan, and long-term for organizations generally tend to be between 1 to 5 years. Of course, there are some organizations which plan even further out in the horizon, like 10 years and beyond. That depends on the nature of the industry. For example, if Boeing decides to come with a new set of aircraft, they will need to plan for it at least 10 years in advance to get all of those things in place. So depending on the nature of the industry, typically, you will see that the strategy tends to play out over a period of 1 to 5 years. And every year you will revisit the strategy and refresh wherever it is needed. Now, in such a case, while of course it is not as complex as the government to execute all of this, a large corporation can have would need coordination and execution from across a multiple set of stakeholders that is there. For example, Reliance Industry has got a diverse set of businesses, or Tata Corporation, Tata and Sons has a diverse set of businesses that they are into. They will, so for Tata and Sons to show an overall growth of say X%, you would need all the businesses to act accordingly. Of course, Tata and Sons is a conglomerate, so their goals would then be broken down to each of these companies that are there underneath. So, for example, TCS would be set a certain goal by the overall conglomerate head, and then that would flow down into the different departments that TCS, for example, has. And each of these teams would need to coordinate amongst themselves. They would need to execute flawlessly and reach the particular objective that is set. Now, in an organization, unlike the government, everybody, including the stakeholders, would want to start seeing results as soon as possible. So this would be typically, over a period of couple of quarters. So if you have created a strategy, and you would want the organization to go ahead and implement it, once upon implementation, you would want the initial results to at least start showing, say, within 2 quarters from when the strategy rollout has happened. And this is wherein your execution is key. You would have a lot of program management offices which would work in tandem with each other, trying to achieve the goals that have been set out. Strategy that is created for organizations or corporations such as this typically tend to have an inside out view. What I mean by inside out view is that the organization would be looking at the rest of the market from inside. They would be, I have worked for corporations in the corporate strategy team like Infosys and HP. So basically what we used to do was look at our own businesses and then look at the market, look at the competitors, and then look at how one would go ahead and achieve those goals or targets that we have in our mind, and then accordingly create the strategy to meet those particular goals or targets. So the view that we used to have was inside out, and the strategy also would hence be an inside out strategy. Moving to the third broad category, it would be the consulting firms, which play a big role in strategy planning and creation of strategy for organizations. So typically, a corporation or the government will approach a consulting firm with a problem in mind. The problem could be as specific as if I'm, say, Unilever, I would want to enter, say, for example, I want to enter the Bangladesh shampoo market within the next 1 year's time. You would have a mandate like that, and that would be taken to a consulting firm. Consulting firm would be told that, hey, I need you to create a market entry strategy into Bangladesh for for the shampoo portfolio that we have. So that would be the kind of mandate that a consulting firm would work on. It would be a very specific goal. It may not be the entire organization's overall goal that it has, but it would be one of those key elements that would help implement that particular overall goal that organization has. So what happens is that your consulting firms work on these sort of mandates. They will take a short period of time, say about 4 to 12 weeks, and leverage their knowledge and expertise and apply the frameworks which they have. So we typically tend to use frameworks to analyze different items within the overall field of play that we have. For example, there are frameworks to examine the product portfolio of the client. If the client says that, I have too many products in my portfolio and I would like to be a very focused company, I would not want, say, 10 different soaps in my portfolio. I would want 3 soaps only in my portfolio and focus very clearly on that. We have frameworks that will analyze and help you understand which are those 3 soap brands that should continue being a part of your organization. There are multiple frameworks, there are multiple analytical methods that will help you reach the objectives that that the organization would want. Apart from that, consulting firms heavily leverage on research to be a part of the strategic plans that are created. The research is typically broken into 2 elements: primary research and secondary research. In primary research, it involves taking interviews or having face-to-face conversations. These could be with clients, could be with your suppliers, could be with your key stakeholders, and whoever would be important in determining the success of your strategy. And you would understand, it could also involve talking to your competitors, for example, to find out if there's something that you would need to do to be a better player in the market. You would then gather those insights from those interviews and then analyze them. The second part is something called secondary research. So there are organizations, research organizations that spend their entire time in purely just understanding very niche and specific markets very well. An example is, you would have an organization which would look at say water purifiers, RO machines, as a market within the state of Uttar Pradesh, and would very specifically focus on how is the RO machine market within the state of Uttar Pradesh, for example. And those organizations would gather data from different sources, primaries, etc., and talk very specifically about what sort of demand is there across the districts, who are the consumers, what are the price points that the consumers are comfortable with, who are the key competitors in all of these areas, and so on. So consulting firms also do that, on a case-to-case basis. But many a times, consulting firms also leverage these research firms to gather those insights and to basically not boil the ocean, but quickly reach to results, because you have a short time frame, and take those insights which they've taken from the secondary research and the primary research, build analytical models and frameworks. So consulting firms would be looking at building a business model, for example, and looking at what would the future cash flows look like for the corporations if they have to meet that particular objective that they have. And once those sort of frameworks and models have been built, we then go ahead and present it to these organizations. We talk to them about what is happening in the market, what sort of peer benchmarks they should be looking at, and then start discussing with the client or the corporation to figure out what is best suited for them, and finally come out with a clear strategy that the corporation can then go ahead and execute it. Now, since the consulting firms do this as an outsider, and they bring in all these outside viewpoints and then marry it in with the corporation's data, that is known as the outside in view. The inside out view versus outside in view differs by the data that is collected. So inside out view will typically be based on the data that the corporations themselves have generated or gathered, and basis that they make the assumptions about the market and build it out accordingly. The outside in view will be looking at broadly how you will gather all of these data points and distill them and put them across. So that is a broad overview on the kind of organizations and the strategy functions. How do they work in them? Moving ahead, what is it that strategy generally tends to be in for an organization? So strategy will typically focus on three key areas for any organization. They will be looking at growth, or they will be looking at achieving more efficiency, or of late, organizations will be looking at creating more sustainability. So growth related objectives would be to look at how do you increase the revenue of the organization, and you would examine all of the growth levers one by one and look at what would be the best way to achieve that particular desired outcome. This would involve growth levers like new markets that the organization could explore. For example, Ralco Tires is an Indian company. Could they go ahead and look at new markets like Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, or maybe Africa as a market for their products? You could look at new portfolio. So Ralco Tires, again, for example, they are known for their two-wheeler tires today. Could they increase their portfolio to go into four-wheelers and very specific requirements, which would be, say, performance-related tires or something like that? Then the next lever could be something like expand your existing market. Like you have your existing product, how do you get a bigger market share within that? How do you outperform your competitors? And then the final part is, of course, maybe the market is not that intensely competitive. All you need to do is up your own production or look at a better pricing to go ahead and win more clients. So to achieve this, the ways to achieve this could be through two routes, which would be organic growth. Organic growth involves making changes in your internal organization to achieve your outcome, versus inorganic growth, which would be through mergers, acquisitions, buyouts, or in some cases even divesting some of your non-profitable businesses. So if you're not able to make a profit in that business, it could also involve selling off those businesses. So these are the two routes that are followed by companies to achieve their overall growth related objectives. The second one focuses on efficiency. This is all to do about your margins, which is your operating profit, your operating income. How do you improve that? So operating net income is something, of course, that the tax specialists take care of and look at how do you structure all of that. But organizations are very focused on the operating income or the operating profit. And consulting firms and organizations both look at how do you improve your operations to be more efficient. It could involve things like adopting digital methods. Like there are still a lot of organizations which have not taken up digitization in the true spirit, and they are not able to reap those benefits that way. Today, because of the pandemic, most of the organizations which are consumer focused, for example, have been forced to go down the route of direct to consumer. Automobile companies, which generally tend to go through their networks of their partners, they also have started looking at direct to consumer. Like a very good example is Tesla, for example. They sell it directly to the consumer, and that is also something that is coming into the market. So those could be some of those efficiency points that could help you improve your operations and make sure that you get the best out of whatever you have. This efficiency improvement will also involve identifying and mitigating certain risks. So there will always be business risks, and these could be risks like supply chain or inventory related risks or raw material related risks. Today, I think all of you, while you've read your newspapers, you would have been reading about the coal crisis that's happening over a period of the last month. That's the cause of that is because of the raw material deficit, and that's a huge risk that the country at a country level that we are facing. How do you mitigate those sort of risks to achieve efficiency? How do you build those strategic stockpiles or purchase those particular items through through whatever means that you're buying? What are the kind of cost arbitrages that you can manage in procurement of your raw materials, etc.? Those also could be elements that your efficiency related strategy could focus. The sustainability part is now something that's becoming a part of every organization. Organizations are now realizing that the most influential stakeholder perhaps is the overall society and environment today. So with most companies, most large organizations looking at the triple bottom line reporting methodology today, they are very focused on ensuring that whatever they do, however they produce their goods or whatever processes are there, they're environmentally sustainable. The goods that they produce are ethically sourced, and the kind of ways how it is produced is also ethically produced. So you will see a lot of organizations which are now heavily focused on improving this particular aspect of the business. So now that we've had a look, how is it that the organizations are structured within, how is the strategy function structured within large corporations and consulting firms? So in large corporations or mid-sized or even small-sized corporations today, you have a clear-cut corporate strategy department or a central planning department, which typically works with the CXOs, the board of directors, and the business unit heads, along with some of the external consultants. External consultants could be firms like, of course, the Big Fours, or your Big Three in strategy consulting, which would be your McKinsey's, BCG's, Bain's, and so on, or the strategy consulting arms of firms like EY, like Parthenon, or Strategy and which is a part of PwC, and so on. The corporate strategy team will generally focus at the high level goals of the organization. They will focus on how is it that, say, if you're looking at an organization like Infosys, how is it that I can manage a 10% annual growth rate in terms of my revenue, along with a 5% improvement in my operating margin on a year-on-year basis. So those sort of high-level strategies and plans is something that the corporate strategy team will do. And these teams typically report into either the CEO, CFO, or the Chief Operating Officer at a firm. Another department that will be within the organization will be the corporate development department. Typically, this is housed separately from the corporate strategy department. This will be looking purely at mergers and acquisitions, integration, post-merger integration, or divestitures, divestments, etc. Those sort of things will be looked at by the corporate development M&A team. Sometimes the corporate development team will also look at corporate governance. So that's something which will be either housed in the corporate strategy team or within the corporate development team, and will look at all the corporate governance related requirements as well. Such a team will typically focus, as I said, on all the inorganic growth related elements that the organization needs to look at, and will typically report into the head of mergers and acquisitions or the CFO or CEO. Now, one thing that I want to talk about the corporate development team or M&A team, we generally tend to think M&A could be about one firm buying the other, selling the other, and so on and so forth. But many a times it is not something at that level. It could be as small a transaction as maybe a factory being or a plant being sold somewhere, or land assets that are there by the organization being sold, or a strategic purchase of a particular patent being done for the purpose of manufacturing something. So even something like that comes under the purview of the corporate development organization. Now, the next team would be the business planning team. Now, business planning team will be looking more at your day-to-day operations and would work very closely with the finance and the operations leaders, and would have a laser sharp focus on ensuring that all the operations of the team, of the organization, happens flawlessly. This is perhaps one of the most important departments also in any organization, because they ensure that the company truly exists, continues existing. So that is something that happens. And the business planning team typically tends to report into the COO at most of the organizations. Now, a new type of team which has emerged over the last decade or so has been the data analytics team. With a lot of data being generated both inside within the organization and from customer or consumer insights coming in from outside, you have a lot of data which can play a key role in ensuring whether the company succeeds in its goals or fails. And hence, the need for your data analytics teams is something that has come very strongly across all types of firms globally. So these teams typically tend to work with middle management and senior management. They ensure that they provide actionable insights through compelling visualizations, dashboards, etc., that will pinpoint whatever data needs to be focused on. And these sort of organizations generally tend to report into the COO or the CTO, or nowadays there's this new post of head of analytics that is there in organizations. The final team that I would like to talk about is the strategic initiatives or PMO team, which is the program management office. So what happens is, with so many things happening across, you would have multiple sets of initiatives that would be needed to achieve one goal. So a goal like improving efficiency by 5% year on year would involve multiple functions, would involve multiple businesses. An example is that attrition at an organization, which is resignations in an organization, can play a key role in destroying the margin or reducing the margin, because you will take time to train a person, become productive, and then only then they'll start working in a certain way. So attrition would be very heavily linked to people functions, which would be employee satisfaction, etc. So that would be, for example, one part of the objective, which would be to improve employee satisfaction through a number of initiatives that would be undertaken. At the same time, you would have operational initiatives that would be undertaken as well. Like you would find out that automation of certain tasks would improve your efficiency by Y%. Now, since there are many moving parts, there is a chance that there is not enough coordination between teams, or there is a delay or a deadlock that is being caused. And to help ensure that everything is kept on track, now many organizations have started to have a strategic initiatives or a program management office, which will oversee all of these and ensure that whatever synergies are there between the work streams that are being done are achieved. Moving on, I do understand that we are nearing an hour's time. If the audience is fine, I would take a little more time than that. But I will quickly run through, what else is typically is observed within the industry. So this slide, I think, is something that would interest quite a lot of people today. What are the entry points into a career of strategy at this point in time? You can very quickly break it down into three distinct categories today, which would be an analyst, a consultant, and a data scientist. By analyst, this particular role would be focused on corporations largely and would require your, and just give me one moment. Sorry. Yeah. So this particular role would be an entry level role into a corporation's corporate strategy team or business planning team. And at an entry level, the person would be expected to be very handy with tools like Microsoft Excel. I know that the world runs on Excel, unfortunately, even today, but be very handy with understanding data, analyzing data, and being a key part to execution of some of these parts. The entry route into these sort of roles would typically be within their corporate strategy teams, within the finance teams, or within the program management teams. The kind of qualifications that people look at today would be a CA or equivalent, which would work, or an MBA. These roles, CA and MBA roles, would generally be at a slightly higher entry level touch point. For graduates, the entry level is also there. I mean, most of the organizations where I've worked takes graduates on board, and they would be working on these particular objectives of the team and then growing vertically within the team as well. The second set is, consultants. So getting into a consulting firm, the key responsibilities would be research. And research would involve, searching, working through all different databases that are present, which would have information, looking at web searches, doing primary research, phone calls, etc. Doing a lot of this outside in analysis and preparing slides and Excels and models and all of those sort of things. And the most important thing is, for a consultant, the key skill is to be a good storyteller. You have to be able to narrate your findings in an effective manner through the medium that is presented to you, which would typically be a PPT, or if you're presenting or having a workshop, it would be about how you take control and narrate the overall story that you're having. The kind of teams that look at entry level folks would be the strategy consulting teams. So for example, within EY, firms like EY Parthenon also takes graduates and postgraduates into that particular field. You have the M&A teams, which would be picking up people. And within, I think I skipped one slide earlier. I wanted to, I'll just go back to that. I wanted to talk about value creation and investment banking, basically within consulting firms. So value creation teams are teams that look at, once that you have identified that you have to acquire a company after an M&A deal has been thought of, how is it that you would unlock the synergies that one had planned out during the phase of acquisition. So value creation teams typically tend to focus on those sort of things. And the investment banking teams within the corporate development or M&A teams within consulting firms are the ones who will be looking out for all these sort of acquisition deals and divestment deals that are happening across the board. Going back to where we were, so value creation teams and M&A teams also are entry points for freshers across different levels. So again, the requirements for them would be, in terms of graduates, they tend to pick commerce graduates and engineering graduates for these particular roles. Postgraduates, they tend to pick MBA, CA, and equivalent. So those are some of the entry points. The third major entry point that is there today are data scientists. So data scientists are the ones who go ahead and create all the beautiful data analysis that's a key part of any strategy or planning team today. And they are the ones who create those dashboards, those beautiful, compelling outcomes that one would want to see from the overall research perspective. Your business analytics teams, your business intelligence teams, and strategy teams are typically the places where data scientists or data analysts are hired. The kind of qualifications typically that one would look for would be having some sort of background in statistics or math, would be MBA folks, could be STEM graduates, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or now more and more often you're seeing even commerce graduates being picked for data science roles. Now, the key things that any recruiter looks for when they are hiring at these roles are these attributes that have been outlined in yellow. The person needs to display a higher level of curiosity than normal. You need to question everything. You need to ask yourself questions and demonstrate that curiosity in everything that you do. You need to have a good analytical mind. When you're presented with a lot of data points, you should not be lost within so many data points. You should be able to focus clearly and be able to analyze the data to get those insights. You need to have great storyboarding skills. By storyboarding, I mean that once you have all of these data insights and everything with you, you need to present it in a manner that makes sense to everybody. So you need to be able to have that flow that makes sure that everybody who's there stays with you and understands what you're trying to say. You need to have great convincing capabilities, because a strategy person's biggest challenge is trying to convince your other stakeholders to do what is necessary to meet that particular objective, and to bring all of those data points and collaborate and work together to meet that goal. You need to be open to ideas, because in strategy, many times there are so many things that is happening in the world that we may not be aware of, and suddenly something like the pandemic comes in along the way, and you have to change the way how business operates. You have to change the way how things are done. You have to be open to ideas on how to go ahead and meet that goal that you set yourself. You need to lead from front. Excuse me. You need to lead from front. You need to be the one who will roll up their sleeves and tell upfront, be vocal about your thoughts, and share whatever you think it should be done. And you should be confident enough to take it upon yourself and take it along with you. You need to be an excellent finisher. Whatever tasks you begin, don't leave them halfway. You need to ensure that whatever you start with, you finish it within time and within expectation. And most importantly, you need to be patient, because many a times at the start of the career, you will be doing a lot of heavy lifting and work that will be not as glamorous as it seems. A lot of times it could be just a lot of Excel related work, or a lot of just skimming through different websites and trying to find out what's happening around the world, or just trying to understand, reading a lot of material. You need to be patient, because even at my level today, when I'm having finished close to 15 years within the strategy field, I don't shy away from doing things like going on to the site of a company and physically noting down what are the products that are there, what are the price points that they're selling at, like sabun ki tikki kitne mein bik rahi hogi on one site versus the other. Doing that sort of thing also, one should be okay to do that at any point in time. Roll up your sleeves and do it. So with that, I mean, this is the overview that I had in mind. I would, of course, say that this is just a very high level overview, a very high level touch that's been done. This is nowhere, close to what strategy is all about. This is more of a refresher or a starting point from where you can start looking at. And I hope that this session leaves you with a little more knowledge about strategy than what you had before. What I have next is the Q&A section. So Q&A, the team had submitted some of the questions that the participants have put across. I'll try and answer them to the best of my knowledge and to the best of my capabilities. I just hope that not too many of these answers are extremely controversial. So, yeah. So the first question is, how is the work-life balance in the corporate world at the position of an assistant manager or manager? It's a very nice question, and I'm of course going to answer it from the perspective of a strategy professional. Work-life balance in the corporate world, I would say, is much better within corporations or organizations as compared to a consulting firm. As an assistant manager or manager, it's a high pressure job. It's a high paying, high pressure, high reward, high risk sort of a profile. And you will land up putting in a lot of hours, even at an assistant manager or manager level. I remember when I was a manager and was working on strategy engagements, uh, most of my days I used to work till at least 9-10 p.m. With a start at about 7:38 in the morning. There were days when I was working till 3-4 in the morning, about 7-8 days in a month. Weekends, quite a lot of weekends go in those high pressure assignments. But when I compare it to my stint at the organization or corporation side, I found that the work-life balance out there was a lot better. Of course, there's nothing called a 9 to 5 sort of job today. Everything is very fluid, flexible. You have your goals and objectives. It is all up to you on how you manage to achieve your set targets and your goals and outcomes for the day. But work-life balance at the start could be a little tough. But once you are aware of how things happen and how they are done, you will start finding that balance. So over a period of time, I mean, now I don't work those long hours, and I tend to find a lot more time for my family. I tend to find a lot more, balance coming with that. But I will say this: it is an extremely enriching environment. I find it extremely fulfilling, and the curiosity and factor in me keeps me engaged with the work. Like, I am very curious about how I would say take a product from some place like Ralco tires. How do I take it into Zimbabwe, and how do I ensure that it is a successful way of doing that? And those sort of things, like, I would like to understand what is it that the consumers in Zimbabwe are buying in terms of vehicles and two-wheelers. How often do they change all of that? So those sort of things keep me up, and that sort of energy comes from within. The second question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, what amount of concentration and hard work you have to put in to reach where you are right now? This question is very simple. It's 10 on 10 at every single point in time. Consulting can be a very punishing profession, and I'll be very blunt about that. So especially, when it comes to strategy consulting firms, if you're not performing, I've seen brutal teams wherein, within 6 months, they could ask someone to leave the organization if they're not performing to the expectations. There are more organizations which are very patient as well, but it can be brutal. And you have to bring in your A game with you every time and every day that you walk into office, or you log in every day. What are some of the essential skills or opportunities one should have to learn into corporate strategy roles? Well, I mentioned those attributes that one would need, the ones in yellow, which is curiosity, etc. You need to come in with the right attitude. See, skills are something that one can always develop later. Skill development is easier. But if your attitude is not right, if your attitude is not right, it's not going to work out for you. But if your attitude is fine, skills can be acquired over a period of time. People are very happy to share knowledge within strategy teams. They're very happy to bring someone up to the speed, also partially because then you can share your workload with them. But learning flows quite easily. So that can come up pretty quickly. In terms of opportunities, always, it's something wherein you need to keep your eyes and ears open. You need to look at entry points like program management offices, or working with stakeholders who are working very closely with corporate strategy. And more often than not, if you land up showing all the right attitude set, you get absorbed into the team for sure. The next question is, what technical knowledge would you recommend the finance consultancy freshers should know, to outstand and so on? I'm guessing this is more from a technical standpoint. So today, everybody needs to know, be conversant with technology, and Excel, though, of course, is something that's there only. But learning coding languages like Python or data visualizations, softwares. There are multiple like Tableau and others will definitely play a big role in helping you land the right job. I know everyone in my team, has learned these over a period of time, and it definitely helps, folks to land those sort of jobs. The next question: will corporates prefer using AI in their workforce? The answer is yes. The simple answer is yes. Artificial intelligence is here to stay, but it is not here to replace people. So artificial intelligence will not replace the workforce, but will make some of the things a lot more efficient and cleaner. There would be some functions that would be more impacted by automation, which would be things like in production and say supply chain. There are automated elements that would come in, but broadly from a corporate function, from a finance function, from strategy function, you wouldn't see people being replaced by AI. You would see people being, leveraging AI more to deliver more efficiently. Questions like this were also asked when Excel came into picture. Like, would this really replace people? The answer is no, but it would create an effective, impactful tool for you to operate even better. Can corporates run the economic system in a better way than the government and introducing them to each sector through public partnership and so on? Well, it's a loaded question. It's difficult to answer. The reason is, we will be tempted to answer and say that yes, corporates will run it in a better way than the government. But you need to understand that corporates are good at, achieving goals like improving your profitability and so on. Governments have a much larger role. How do you positively impact people? And these impacts would have many a times would not have any monetary outcomes end of the day, or could not even, or maybe not have an outcome in one generation itself or two generations. So corporates, while they can very efficiently run some of these programs, to hand them over to corporates would not be a great idea. For example, governments have to take tough calls on a day-to-day basis. An example is, the COVID vaccine, for example. The government had to take a tough call on who should get these vaccines first. And government knew that the impact would be direct on people. There would be people dying because of this. And you need to be able to take those decisions which would also result in deaths of people. But at the same time, you need to take a clear decision that would be helping the larger public on a whole. So I believe that both have their own roles, but yes, partnerships will help improve a lot of this. Niti Aayog, in fact, has started taking a lot of corporates into their team to help in the planning process. And I think that's a positive impact that's there. So that's something that one would definitely would happen more and more in the future. The next question is, if I were in charge of strategic planning for your organization, what changes would you make? It's a difficult question because, strategy in an organization itself changes very rapidly. You need to change is the key word and key component. Everybody's taking it and running. One thing that I would definitely want people to do is stop and, as they say, smell the roses. Take the time to understand and look at the overall impact that you're creating. Also take some time apart. So work-life balance would be one thing that I would try and get in terms of changes. But from an organization standpoint, the other thing is, encouraging organizations to use all the tools that are there at hand. We see many a time strategy organizations in companies don't tend to leverage your data analytics as much as they should. They feel skeptical about using it. They're not open to ideas. So open to ideas is something that I would definitely want organizations to continue seeing. The next question is how to prepare for strategy consulting. Any courses that we can do? Well, courses, like I mentioned, yeah, technically, if you're trying to upskill yourself, look at visualization related tools and so on. The courses and everything, there are many strategy frameworks that are there in place. Getting yourself familiarized with those helps you examine any problem in a very analytical manner and having the expected outcomes. It makes it very easy for a recruiter to understand that you are someone who understands, knows how to prepare strategy or work in a strategy team and take you there. So I would suggest, look at some of the technical tools like visualization tools and data analytics tools, and B, to look at familiarize yourself with some of the strategic frameworks that are used to solve the client problems. The next question, how did you make the best use of internships that I did? Well, I did a couple of strategy internships. One was with a company called Branson Ultrasonics, and the second one was with Pidilite Industries. So with Pidilite, it was about overall changing their distribution network strategy itself. So what I did was, step one, the goal that was given to me in my internship was a much smaller piece of goal. What I did was I went ahead and I asked for a much bigger, much more bigger responsibility. The way how I did it was, of course, you can't go on day zero only and say that, भाई आपका काम जो आपने दिया है बकवास है, मुझे ये नहीं करना है, मुझे और कुछ करना है. That won't work. So you need to do whatever you're set out to do, but at the same time, look at the bigger picture and see how can you expand beyond your horizons and take it to the stakeholders. Talk to them. The companies would be more than happy if you come with additional inputs, insights, and talk about it in that manner. So that was something which I did, and it helped me a lot from that perspective. What the next question is, any advice on how to prepare for the corporate world? See, the thing is, in the corporate world, it's like this. So whatever you are learning today, you have to keep that at the core of what you work in the companies. You have to take whatever the teachings are that you have and look at how to execute it flawlessly in the organizations. So whatever you're doing in college today, learn that. I know that, we think that, ye jo seekh rahe iska kab use mein aayega, kya hoga. It's not like that. Trust me, everything that you're learning right now will play a big role within the organization that you go in, and be ready to look at newer ways of how to execute that. And when you go into the corporate world, some of the things that happen is, be ready to do some of the grunt work, as we say. So it may not be glamorous work at start of your career. It will be very simple, very basic. आपको लगेगा ये तो 5वीं पास बंदा भी कर पाएगा, a 5th standard pass person also can do this, but that is something which is required. It is something that there's a reason why you're doing it, because it is needed to meet your overall goal. So those sort of things, also be ready to take that on. Go with an open mind, be friendly, be curious, and it's not as bad a world as you think out there. It's a good world. What should we do besides internship to get our CV shortlisted? Any books, recommended websites? So, one thing on this, it's a slightly tangential answer. CV ka, you need to make sure that your CV itself is very crisp and focused. Today, no one's going to land up reading a CV that goes beyond 2 pages. A 1-pager CV is the best way to portray it, and make sure that you have whatever role that you apply for, you have a very tailor-made CV for that particular role. Please invest 30 minutes, 40 minutes to make your CV a little more relevant for that particular opportunity. So that will help you get shortlisted, that's for sure. In terms of what is it that you can help to enhance your knowledge, there are a lot of interesting books. One of the books that I always recommend is called The McKinsey Mind, and the second book is called The McKinsey Way. These two books talk a lot about the frameworks that are used to solve all of these strategy related questions. Apart from that, there are several videos on YouTube where a lot of McKinsey and Bain, BCG, Parthenon consultants will talk about how they tackle and improve these particular things. Follow Ashwath Damodaran if you don't. There are a lot of interesting insights that he generates. So, some of those things will definitely help you understand how to solve a problem better. Okay, the next question is, as a student, generally very few internships are available in this sector. How can one practically explore this? I agree. The internships in this sector are few, but there are internships. For example, when our team starts taking interns, we typically put it up on LinkedIn, and then we start gathering all of those, and then we pick them up. But the other part is, if you want to build a career in strategy, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to start in strategy itself. You can start in operations and build your way up. You can start in finance and build your way up. So there are multiple entry points. So I would say that don't be very focused on getting an internship only and only in strategy if you want to build your career in that. But be a little more open-minded. Try to figure out if this can eventually lead into the path that you want to get into. Next question is, what are some of the best strategies for a startup in the future, especially for a student, CA student? Simple, bhai. I mean, any startup is good as long as you can secure funding. But, when you start looking at startups, one of the key problems is people tend to be very exuberant at the start, and they tend to think कि भाई हमारा idea तो hit है. I mean, we will succeed come what may. The truth is that in terms, and I think everybody's gone through that statistics, lesser than 1% of startups actually succeed. The truth is that you need to be very, very sure that you have to, you'll be working 24/7, 365. You need to make sure that you know your market well. So whenever you're planning to get into a startup or you're beginning a startup, ensure that you know your market better than anybody else, and that is the key to getting success in that. Once you are very clear about everything, once you know about all the risks that are involved, once you are very sure and confident about numbers that are reasonable, you can then start approaching investors. So investors, of course, they are not like ऐसे ही बैठे नहीं है कि that they don't know the market. They know the markets better than you in many cases. So, you need to ensure that you don't oversell yourself. A lot of the investors generally tend to prefer investing in firms who know their risks very well, who know that, this is how we can fail. And if we know how we can fail, we'll try our best not to do that. So those are some of the things. 14, the question is, what are the most important traits? Like I said, curiosity, the right attitude, patience, and overall, an open mind is something that one would definitely want in terms of traits. What made me decide that I want to take up this as a career? So I've always, as a child also, I always was the person who used to sit down and prepare strategies, whether it was for in sports or whether it was something else. I used to love doing that, sitting down, planning things and getting things in place. I knew from the start that this is where I want to build my career, and I kept at it. So when recruitments happened in the college as well, campus placement time, I was very sure about what I wanted. It didn't matter if the pay was not as much at times in this. So with an investment banking profile, you would get a higher pay, but with the strategy, it would not be that much. But I was very sure that I wanted to do this, and the reason behind that was I always have this inherent thought that I'm good at sitting and planning things and getting things in a very clear way, and bringing all of those elements together. What achievements are you most proud of? Honestly, none of them. I'm not proud of any of my achievements, but some of the things that make me feel happy end of the day is when you're given a target, like you have to improve the employee. When I was at Infosys, I was given a goal to improve employee utilization from X% to Y%. And the reason why we were at X% was because a lot of employees were not having projects in hand. Most of the companies would land up straightforward firing those employees and asking them to not come in to work from the next day onwards. What I did was I found a way to bring from X to Y, which was a substantial gap, by looking at ways how to retain folks, reskill, redeploy them into the right places without firing even a single employee. The number of employees who would have been impacted were around 30,000 employees. So not one of them was fired. So that, I think, was one of the things that I feel happy about, not proud. I just feel happy that I didn't take the route that was suggested by my managers at that point in time, who had told me, let's just do that. But I said that, no, give me some time. I'll think of a way to, do something by not firing anybody. So that's something. One advice you got from your mentor that played a crucial role in my career. So I have had the good fortune of having Mr. Narayan Murthy as my direct manager at Infosys for a period of time. He used to give a lot of advice, but one thing that he gave me as advice, I still remember. So Mr. Murthy, by the way, at the age of 68 also, he used to come into office at 6 a.m. and used to go home at about 9 p.m. And this was every single day of the week, including weekends. So one of the days I was there sitting working, and I remember it would have been 7 or 8 p.m. He walks by my desk and he asks, "Young man, what are you doing here?" I said, "Sir, I'm trying to finish this work and this sort of thing." He said, "Young man, see, the reason why I sit in office from so long is that my children have grown up and my wife keeps nagging me at home. So I stay here for that reason. As young people, you should be able to go and live your life." So that was one advice that I always keep in mind, that career is not everything. Living your life involves fulfilling your responsibilities towards all the stakeholders, which is your family, to the larger society, to everybody that's around. Taking some time off for your me time, which would involve doing something that you truly enjoy and makes life worth living, and taking that with you and giving enough time to your family as well. End of the day, everybody earns money to spend time with your loved ones, and if you're not doing that well enough, then there's something missing. So that was something which I took as an advice, that young man, you have a life outside, and remember that is the key to it. So with that, I mean, Saurabh, if there are more questions, if anybody has questions, I would love to answer them.
Yes, sir. I'm opening the chat box again.
Yes,
Sure.
we have one more question in the chat box. That
Sure.
does it require a lot of capital to start research?
Okay, so a lot of capital to start research. I'm not sure whether I got the question rightly, but I'm assuming, yeah, if you're looking at how do you do all of this research, primary and secondary research, it costs organizations money to, of course, do that. If you have to do a primary interview, for example, if I want to know how Procter and Gamble's operating model is for, a simpler example, say Procter and Gamble is buying a talcum powder manufacturer somewhere, yeah, and we want to know whether that company is doing well, that company which we are buying is doing well. We need to talk to someone who's also supplying material to that company, because that is a key indicator कि payments in time ho raha hai ya nahi, whether you're able to do that. To get those sort of contacts of people, to talk to them, it costs money. I mean, there are organizations that specifically do that in sourcing of those people and then speaking to them, and then also trying to figure out whether the market sizing is right or not. Like, and it could be a very specific market size. Like, now I want to know, like RO wala example, I want to know what is the market size within Gautam Budh Nagar within UP, and specifically within Noida, what's the market size. So that would involve talking to a lot of these suppliers, distributors, etc., which would take time and money, and time, of course, is equal to money. So investment of capital is there. In terms of secondary research, yes, there are companies that have built up businesses around creating these databases and these reports. And these reports tend to be a little on the higher side. So $2,000 to $3,000 is where they start. So if that is the question, that's the answer. If the question was capital about something else, happy to answer if the question has a follow-up in that. Any other questions?
I want to, sir, I am very thankful that you have accepted the invitation of student and has come here to enlighten their views on this subject strategy. I will tell you in our MCOM, there is full subject on strategic management, and each chapter is in itself itself subject. Each chapter is subject in itself. You may be aware of that things. Although you try your best to give in this 1 hour lecture you cover many important points, and so we are thankful as from faculty side that you enlighten the views of our student. And now there is one question.
Yes,
so
sir.
what happened in academic world now? We are now very enthusiastic. It is introduced by our uh, academic world. Now you have to corporate are now embracing it. It is about environment and society concerns. First, we academic has fought for it. Then corporate world has accepted it with our lot of struggles, lot of research, lot of now corporate is accepting this. Okay, but I want to still there is dilemma in my mind whether corporate are still embracing it by heart or it is just lip service.
That's a fantastic question, sir. In fact, sustainability, honestly speaking, it used to be lip service at start. It was something wherein people were doing those one or two small gestures to try and do that. But now, what's happened is that consumers, the end consumers, people like you and me, are getting a little more conscious about things. For example, if I have an option of looking at, say, a toothpaste, which is having minimum packaging with low plastic packaging and lesser paper used and everything like that, and it is at the same price point as another, we will go ahead and consciously pick up something that is environmentally friendly. Consumers today are the ones who are really pushing the organizations to actually start becoming more sustainable. And that sustainability is, of course, from the environment perspective. The second part is governments themselves have now started putting in mandates which companies need to adhere to. If they don't, they will not be allowed to operate. So those two factors are now forcing organizations to look at providing beyond just lip service. Of course, there are organizations which have sustainability at the heart of their overall business. There are few of those, and they whatever they do, they try to make sure that it is environmentally low impact, has the best things done for the society around them as well. But it is growing, and I agree with you that this was a long fought battle which has started bearing fruit now. In fact, the students now who are there on the call, I'm pretty sure everyone would want things like, if people wear makeup or face creams, you would want something that is cruelty free, that is not being tested on animals, preferably, if something like that is there. So a lot, as consumers and as society, we become more and more aware of this, and we start pushing companies, corporates to create those products. And the way how we push is we start preferring those products. And a very simple example was like companies like Colgate in the past were not into herbal toothpastes, but when Patanjali came, started introducing something like that, they were forced to bring that into the market. Now, especially in the West, we started seeing firms which are very clearly calling out the sustainability element within the packaging itself, or talking about the entire supply chain for on that product itself. You can scan the QR of that product, and it will tell you exactly where it was sourced from, how much carbon dioxide was generated in producing it, and all those parameters. And as the consumers become more and more aware, corporates are being forced to actually make it a part of their strategy. And today, as a consulting firm, we are seeing more demand coming in from how do we become more sustainable. And that is a key part of at least the larger firms globally. I hope that answered your question, sir.
I have put this question especially for students. What our students do, our BCom honors course is very comprehensive. But what they tend to do, they think that they have to just study it for passing it, and we are also lenient in giving them marks. But when they go into practical life, after 10-15 years they realize, oh sir ने ये करवाया था, इसका मतलब आज हम समझे हैं. मतलब because you know in Ramjas our faculty is so मतलब faculty is highly aware of many things. But this question I've deliberately put you to make students thinking, yes, what we are teaching is of important concern. And if they do not realize this, then they realize in practical world after 10-15 years, much later in their life, then they realize. Like I tell you talk about Excel, importance of Excel in analysis. So we have full computer application in business, and we taught them Excel in very extensive, but they tend to ignore it. Paper pass करना है. But if they can do it in the class itself, they will learn many analysis which is requirement on the corporate world. So I have specially put this question only for the students. And sir, I know you are a consultant at EY, and you are aware of this. How when you're giving advice to your clients, you must talk about these issues as well.
Absolutely. In fact, sir, Excel is bread and butter. I mean, everything is on Excel and PPT. These are two things. Okay. The second thing is statistics, for example. I mean, please pay attention to all the statistics related learning that's there. The third thing is your finance, background, your finance basics have to be extremely clear. You need to understand all your basics. So something as simple as, a gearing ratio, or, all your liquid ratios, etc. You will be looking at it only from an academic purpose, but trust me, this is something that's used on a day-to-day basis. And you need to start not just doing this from a mathematical perspective. Okay, gearing ratio, this is the the inventory ratio, or so on and so forth, turnaround ratio and so on. Those things, you need to interpret them. So, to the students also, my advice is, whatever basics you're learning in college is the very basic level at which you will start entering. And that is at the core of everything that you do. So you need to understand that and find out and start looking at what the applications truly are. So keep understanding, questioning your own self at, how is this thing done, or why is this thing being done? Why is this so important? How is this being applied in real life, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. You have enriched student with live example, and this would enlighten their path for the future. Thank you, sir. Saurabh, you can give vote of thanks.
Yeah. The only thing I would like to, put now is one very, very good quote by Michael Porter, who's known as the father of strategy. He says that the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. The truth is, you will always have 100 options, and picking the right option is the most important thing. So choosing what not to do is at the core of everything. Thank you.
And this you say na ki, the investor invested in those who know their risk. So yes, if they know the risk, then they know what not to do.
True, exactly.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for answering all the questions with so much patience. And today's session was quite valuable, and we learned a lot and quite interested to explore. So, is it possible that the Commerce Society students can deep venture into it, like some projects from your side or some internships?
Sure, absolutely. So in fact, we do have an internship program, and I believe that somewhere around December is when it kickstarts. I will keep in touch with the team, and whenever that begins, I mean, we can circulate it widely across. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. And now I would like to invite our president to present the vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, audience, for being so patient. Sir, it was quite an interactive session. Sir, I also learned a lot. I never deep dived into strategy. Strategy was just a single word for me in like my 12th or BCom, but I got to know what strategy is actually, like how you're using in like the corporations or government. It was a, sir, I have learned a lot more, and it was very valuable session for all of us. We are very fortunate to have you with us, and wholeheartedly, I thank you for taking your time from busy schedule to be present with us. Thank you, sir. So
Thank you
we are
so much
looking,
to the entire team. Been lovely interacting with everybody.
so
Thank
we are
you.
looking more sessions from your side in the future, and sir, we
Sure.
hope that you will be connected with us.
Sure. I would love to, share more of my thoughts and, do deep dives on the same. And do reach out to me. We'll definitely have something in the works.
Sure, sir. So I request participants if they could turn on the camera for the screenshots. Yeah, thank you, sir. So,
Thank you so much. All right. Wishing you a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you.
thank you.